Hello and welcome to Inside Sports. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. While Little League and high school baseball's popularity in suburban America remains high, the sport is losing popularity in urban areas like the city of St. Louis. On today's show, we'll discuss this trend with Emmy award-winning producer and author, Dr. Ed Wheatley. Plus, we'll go inside a unique baseball collection that's near and dear to my heart. So stay with us for this and much more coming up next on Inside Sports. Joining us via Zoom is award-winning author and the president of the St. Louis Browns Historical Society, Dr. Ed Wheatley. Ed, how are you today?
Well, doing well.
You know, you're just plugging along. You've got a long history in baseball. I think it predates you, and you've been covering this, and you've had some great success, not only authoring books, but on television productions as well. Tell us about it.
It's been really fun. I mean, I grew up in baseball. My dad played professional baseball. I played, and I still play today, about 100 games in senior leagues across the country. But baseball's always been a passion. It's always been something that you can take people back in time with happy memories. And, I got involved with the St. Louis Browns Historical Society and Fan Club. We've got about 700 members nationwide. And, we hold annual luncheons. We get about 400 plus people attend our annual luncheons every year as we gather with former players and some with the Browns, outside the Browns as well. And then I wrote a book to kind of stimulate the Browns fan base, the memories, bring them back, because, they hadn't played in St. Louis in 60 plus years, even though they played here for 52 years. They're the forgotten team in baseball. Baltimore doesn't recognize them like, the other teams like Oakland recognizes the Philadelphia Athletics, the Dodgers recognize the Brooklyn Dodgers, the Atlanta Braves recognize the Milwaukee and Boston Braves, but Baltimore is nothing. So that book got a lot of awards, was received very well across the country. I speak many times up in Cooperstown, and that led to the development of several PBS movies on baseball that I put together that, have done very, very well. And, I've followed up the Browns books with multiple other books and films, and I've got 3 or 4 more books I'm working on right now as we speak.
So it's just a nonstop evolution of continuing to write books and I guess live out your passion. So you say you still play baseball?
Yeah.
Now, is this in like an over 40 league or?
Well, there's I play on a 50 and above, a 60 above, and a 65 and above. And we play a lot of former major leaguers, good college ball players. Play these leagues across the country. We go into tournaments. We even have an international type World Series where teams come from other parts, the Caribbean, Mexico, the United States, Canada, and we've been lucky enough to win it too. So it keeps you young. You feel like you're in your 20s and 30s, but it's wood bats, steel spikes, pitchers throwing 70, 80 miles, catchers throwing you out, stealing, and it's the real deal. Just a tad slower than the show, but it's
do the bases seem a little bit longer than they were back in the day?
When I first started back, they seemed like a little further, but once you've been doing it as many years as I've been doing it, it really doesn't seem to be that far. Running the bases, or like going in the hole at shortstop and trying to make a throw over to first. It's like I said, the quality. It's definitely not a beer softball league. This is like a real deal. And sometimes we'll, like last February in Florida, we were down there playing and kicking off a spring training tournament, and we were playing a couple teams that had 6, 7, 8 former major leaguers on them. So it's just fun. It's a good challenge.
I had the opportunity of meeting you at the St. Louis Cardinals winter warm-up a few years ago, and the Cardinals thought enough about you to bring you in to do a forum. I'm sure you do quite a bit of these, but how important it is to have the support of the St. Louis Cardinals, one of the best organizations in all of Major League Baseball, supporting you, even though it's not from the Cardinals, it's from another team that played in St. Louis.
Well, I mean, I think there's a definite honor. The Cardinals are one of the best baseball teams in the country. They may be the best. They're only second to the Yankees in pennants, World Series. They go out of their way, and part of it is really because St. Louis is a baseball town. And I get invited every year to speak at the Winter Warm-Up because we're speaking about baseball, and baseball is this great city, the best in America. And everybody says that around the country. Now, the other thing too, keep in mind, is the DeWitt family has a deep history in the St. Louis Browns. Not only was Bill DeWitt Jr., the CEO of the Cardinals, was he a bat boy, and we've got many famous pictures of him as a bat boy in his Browns uniform. Probably the most predominant picture is the one of him and Babe Ruth in 1948, just weeks before Ruth died, where Bill DeWitt was there, and Ruth is showing him how to swing a bat. But his father, Bill DeWitt Sr., was a longtime general manager of the Browns. He was a protege of Branch Rickey, came to the Browns in the early 1920s and worked his way up. He became the general manager, put together the 1944 American League pennant winning team with the Browns, stayed with them. He even bought the Browns. He and his brother Charlie bought the Browns in 1948. They were the owners for several years before Bill Veeck came to town and bought it. And then Bill DeWitt Sr., he went to went to Detroit for a while, went to the Yankees for a while, wound up in Cincinnati. 1961, he won the National League pennant with the Reds. First man to win as a general manager pennants in both leagues. So they have a rich history, but it's really honoring what and why St. Louis baseball is so important, and this strong history. There's so many things, and that's why I wrote my one book, Baseball in St. Louis, Little Leagues to Major Leagues, to really document. And it's not just that the Cardinals are this premier team, the best in the National League, second in the majors to the Yankees, but it starts at the little league level, the amateur kids playing in the sandlots, playing in parks. When it first you got to remember, baseball was first played at Fairgrounds Park in July 1860. And Fairgrounds Park sits at Natural Bridge and Grand, about 4 blocks just to the northeast of Grand and Dodier, where the Cardinals and Browns played in Sportsman's Park. So there's this long, rich history. I mean, it's little things like people forget there was a high school team that had more men in the major leagues in the 40s and 50s than any other high school in the country. And that, of course, was Beaumont High School.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Beaumont High School, because that's a public school. And who are some of the players that played in the big leagues that went to Beaumont?
Well, there were quite a few, but before I get into who were the players, let me just tell you a quick story. The Browns always owned Sportsman's Park, and they played down there at Grand and Dodier. The Cardinals actually played at a field called, for the most part of its tenure, Robeson Field, named after the Cardinal owner. And it was situated 5 blocks from Sportsman's Park up at Van Deventer and Natural Bridge, across the street from Fairgrounds Park. Out of those ashes of the burned grandstand there at Van Deventer and Natural Bridge from Robeson's Field, that's where Beaumont was built. The Cardinals sold the land to the city of St. Louis public school system. They needed a high school in this fast-growing region of North St. Louis. It was another one of Branch Rickey's brilliant moves, because by not having to support a stadium, maintain it, pay all the upkeep and all that, and then selling the land, that's how he invested then in the minor leagues, created the minor leagues that gave the Cardinals all that talent to win those World Series and pennants, in 26, 28, 30, 31, 34, 42, 43, 44, 46. It was all out of there. But I joke in my book, and this is the book, Baseball in St. Louis, Little Leagues to Major Leagues, where I talk about, this is one section, and I said it must have been out of the ashes of that burned out stadium that Beaumont built this powerhouse. It was known as the baseball factory. And, one of probably the most predominant players out of there was Roy Sievers, who was the first rookie of the year in the American League in 1949. He led the league subsequently in home runs and RBIs. And, we had so many other great men that, one of them had played there, but he never played in the major leagues, but he had a Hall of Fame managing career, went with the Orioles and Earl Weaver.
Weaver went to Beaumont.
Oh yeah, and Dick Williams went to Beaumont for a while before he moved. And he was a He's a Hall of Fame manager with the A's, but he was also with several other teams managing. He was a legend. I mean, but there's so many great men. I mean, Buddy Blattner. We hear about Buddy Blattner. He was announcer, but he was a good ball player. We had Chuck Deering, Bobby Hoffman, who had a staunch American League history. Bobby Miller, he pitched for the Cardinals, but then he spent 17 years in the major leagues as a premier pitcher. Lee Thomas, Bob Weisler.
Lee Thomas went to Beaumont?
Yeah. And, the thing of it was, all these players were so good, and the list is endless. And, it all comes back to Ray Elliott, the coach. He created what I said a moment ago was this baseball factory. And then if you got good high school teams, what happens? You have good American Legion teams. And that American Legion team that was associated with that area where Beaumont went was known as Stockham. Well, Stockham regularly played for the finals and won it several years. You follow this pattern, where the great Beaumont teams. Mm-hmm. And there was the great Central team, just the other side of Grand Avenue, led by Frank Bauman, who won it 3 straight years. And Bauman went on to have a very good major league career, won the ERA title with the Red Sox. But then you saw is this transformation and movement of the city and the evolution of the suburbs. We talked about, Central won it 3 straight years. And then Lafayette went out there and won it 3 straight years in the early 70s.
Yeah, 3 straight years in the early 70s. Well, hey, Ed, I want to take a quick break here.
Sure.
And I want to pick this conversation up. And then I want to talk more about your book and get into a couple specific topics about the popularity of baseball. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break right now and stay with us, because when we return, we'll pick up this conversation with Dr. Ed Wheatley right after this.
So there you are, shuffling through a stack of resumes, and you come to mine. This is it. First impression, my way in. But can my resume show you how I truly stand out? Like that I was studying, going to night school while working 2 jobs just to help my parents pay for groceries. Or being the first one to always step up. No, that's something you just can't put on paper. Look beyond the resume and discover new ways to develop great talent that is dedicated, hardworking, and determined like me.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Is our conversation with author Dr. Ed Wheatley, whose new book, St. Louis is a Baseball City from the Little Leagues to the Majors. Ed, let's pick it back up. We were talking about Beaumont, all the famous players that came from there. Then you mentioned Central. I want to get into that, talk a little bit about the Legion, and then I want to talk about some issues and some things, because baseball has really changed from the 50s and 60s here in St. Louis and around the country, because a lot of people are loving baseball, but there are some people that don't seem to be interested in it too much anymore.
It's in a dynamic of change, and got to get that change so everybody loves baseball, right?
Yeah. So I know we went to the break, and we just came out of Beaumont. There was a couple of guys from Central that we're going to talk about. Then we're going to move to Legion. Then we'll go into a couple issues.
Yeah, Frank Bauman was probably one of the premier left-handed pitchers in the late 50s and 60s. He'd come out of Central, and as he said, they rode my back to the title year after year. And he was a preeminent, dominant force. But we also got to remember, on the other side of the river, there was guys like Whitey Herzog. Dal Maxfield was in Granite City. Whitey, of course, was in New Athens, and there were many over there. that had the same dominance in the state of Illinois championship. But there was this movement as suburban St. Louis, the region on both sides of the river, was growing. Lafayette out there won 3 championships, and they put a lot of men into the major leagues, from there. And they also then went on to win a National American Legion title. And then in the 90s, the number 1 team for several years in the high school team in the country was from Edwardsville. And Tom Pyle's teams over there, won multiple state championship and a national championship in the American Legion. So you really see this growth across the region as the region moves and population moves from inner city, downtown areas of St. Louis to the suburbs. But throughout that history, there was also this one underlying constant thing, and it was the Corey League. The Corey League was founded in 1934 by George Corey. And today, its Corey Leagues are still played. There was a time when it mapped and encompassed the whole world, all the states in the United States. And then, as players were in the service and baseball was then introduced to these other countries like in Europe and Japan, the Corey League kind of followed. So the center and evolution of Little League Baseball was St. Louis. And just a real quick side note, so was corkball. Corkball, which you remember growing up and seeing all the little cages behind the bars or behind churches, because it was really introduced by several Catholic priests up in North St. Louis, and they all had corkball. And, corkball was not really known outside the region until American soldiers would get together and soldiers from St. Louis would teach them how to play. I mean, I even got stories of Yogi Berra teaching the Yankees how to play corkball at Yankee Stadium.
I mean, if you can play corkball, you can play baseball, because if you warm up with that little bitty tiny ball, then a baseball or a softball look almost like a water ball.
Oh, it does.
Right. Corkball's kind of gone by the wayside.
It has died too.
Ed, and it's like, I remember growing up, and I was talking to Joe Brown before the show, and we were talking about when we were little kids in the 70s, we would get up, we'd grab our gloves and a couple of bats and a bag of balls and just start knocking on doors. And we would just start going outside and just playing with our neighbors. If we couldn't field a team, we'd play Indian ball.
Well, I mean, that was
all day long until the street lights came on and it's time to go home.
I mean, I was the same way. If you weren't one of the first 18 there to the field in the morning, you had to wait till somebody went home so you could get into the game. It wasn't like, it was just to think about 18 or 20 kids on their own getting together, as you spoke, and playing
organizing
all themselves without the parents screaming and hollering and the pressure. You just did it on your own, whether it was sandlot, whether it was a park at the field or a park at the church. And like you said, I can remember many nights, just my friend and I going over to the church field, had a fence behind it and all that, and we would play on the field and play Indian ball just ourselves, throw it up and, let it rip, see if he caught it, see if it got past him. But the beauty was there was this big focus on youth baseball. But you back up even before that, as I said earlier in the interview, baseball came to St. Louis in July 1860. Now that's even before the Civil War broke out. So baseball had been invented up in Hoboken, New Jersey, not Cooperstown. That myth has been proven incorrect, and finally they're recognizing it up there in Cooperstown at the fields. But it had come across America. And you got to remember, when baseball came to towns, you didn't have TVs, you didn't have video games, you didn't have iPhones. Baseball became the preeminent form of entertainment, and people enjoyed watching baseball. They would go out and watch it. And soon it became competitive. As you had a good team, you would play factories versus factories or towns versus town. And that's what led to professional baseball too, because you wanted to keep and sign the best players to stay with you. But baseball was this form of entertainment, all the way from the 1880s, the 90s, all the way up. And even during World War II, President Roosevelt, shortly after Pearl Harbor, he came out with the green letter, the famous green letter says, "We want baseball." we're going to work hard, long hours to win this war, but I want people watching it. So for so many people, this is their memory. If you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, baseball is important because you had to live through a depression. You had to live through wars. You didn't even know if you were going to have enough food to eat. But baseball was a passion in you, and you instilled that passion in your children growing up, which is your age and my age. But it had always been basically by itself as this special form of entertainment. And now today, with cable TV, video games, air conditioning, because as you spoke, you would go out of the house to go play baseball because it was hot in the house because you didn't have air conditioning. Kids don't want to go outside and play now on their own. And there was all these distractions. There was no really until the mid to late 50s, the NBA and the NFL, they really didn't come together. The NFL doesn't come together into the super sport we see today. That was in the mid 60s with the first Super Bowl. Hockey doesn't come around until the late 60s. So this competition of entertainment, there really wasn't any. It was all baseball.
So baseball they were the America's pastime. They were the main game. I remember in the 60s, there was a lot of famous African-American ball players. I mean, you had Frank Robinson, Bob Gibson, you had all these tremendous players. And it seems like right now in the inner cities, the Cardinals, for instance, have built many baseball fields for the city, for the kids in the schools.
Cardinals care,
I
yes.
see some of them are overgrown right now. And it seems like the black kids growing up, they like to see them to play basketball and football and run track, whereas the Hispanics and the Latin Americans, they're all about baseball. I think baseball, one of the things about it is that you have long careers, long seasons, and high salaries. And football, you get hurt a knee injury, you're done. Basketball, there's a limited amount of people on each roster, but baseball seems to be, you've got a lot of room on your roster, long seasons, long careers.
Well, I think there's two parts to it. Is in 1947 when Jackie Robinson integrated baseball. And one of the things we got to remember, the St. Louis Browns, also in 1947, they signed two players, and they were the first team to have two African-American players in all of baseball shortly after Jackie Robinson, and it'd be another 7 years before the Cardinals integrated. But baseball really caught on, and St. Louis has a rich, and that's the other part, that story that's told in my book, is the African-American experience. There's a long history, not only of the Negro leagues, but like up in North St. Louis, the Tandy Leagues was a amateur baseball league of African-Americans that was really the feeder to the Negro leagues. And we had many great African-American players play in the Tandy League. Sits right out in the park right across from Soldan High School up in North St. Louis. But if you look at, I always say, look at baseball cards. You collect baseball cards as a kid. The superstars of the 50s, Willie McCovey, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, they were all in the National League. The American League stayed segregated to an extent. And that's why then you see this dominance in the 60s of the All-Star game being won. Was it like 17 straight years the National League won? Who were their players? They were African-American. But today, as you said, it's basketball and football. I go into schools to talk about baseball or how to write a book. I wrote a book called Incredible Cardinals. It was really for kids. Turned out as much for parents and grandparents because it's the heroes. It's about the left field wall at Busch Stadium and the players on. Who are these? This is the foundation of the Cardinal franchise, the great players, trying to keep them remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And how I wrote the book, starting with pictures and the little stories. And I'll go in and say, how many watched the ball game last night? Oh, we didn't. We don't watch baseball. And Martin Matthews of the Matthews
Dickey. We got about a minute and a half left. Yeah.
Club, he's asked me to really work on that because they don't have an interest of baseball. And as a result, many of these parks, these old baseball, Surrey Lane, ABC, all these up in North County and North St. Louis have fallen to the waysides.
Wow. Well, before we let you go, Ed, can we get a little information on how we can get a hold of your book and any final thoughts?
Well, I think it's important. We cover. If you went to school, you played baseball, you'll recognize people throughout this book. You recognize your team. It's available. It's called Baseball in St. Louis, Little Leagues to Major Leagues. It's by Reedy Press. You can order any venue online that sells books online. You can get it in any of the brick and mortar stores, or if nothing else, come to us at the St. Louis Browns, because we also sell it. That's just simply email us at stlbrowns@swbell.net.
Well, Ed, we could go on all day
Good.
long, and we probably will after the show. We'll be in touch real soon, and we'll see how we can promote baseball in the city much more and keep the history alive. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. Well, this time we're going to go look at some cool baseball memories from the Blackstock family collection. And welcome to my man cave. Right here at the bottom of my steps into the lower level, you see a sign on the wall. Right above that, it's our illustrious Emmy Award winning night with Louis and Tracy Neal, myself, Yolanda Curry, and Lauren Watt, not in the picture. We've got pictures all over the walls. We got Hank Aaron, Ken Griffey Jr. These are autographs signed Jose Canseco. We got George Foster. Right up top here, Buck O'Neill and Ricky Henderson. Warren Spahn over here. Look at Lou Brock down here in a Cubs uniform. This here is W.J. Blackstock, my great-grandfather. He played in the first recorded box score in 1863 for the Pittsburgh Alleghenies. They later became the Pirates. And first recorded game, town built 1863. So this is a gem. Here's a small sample of hats I've acquired over the years. You'll see a sports trivia night, St. Louis Cardinals World Series championships. Over on this other couch over here, right there, you'll see myself doing a broadcast with Jackie Slater. The year the Rams moved to St. Louis, we did a broadcast 2 games in the playoffs at Parkway South and Parkway Central. It was Tom Bells, Greg Thompson with me. Yeah, we've got crates and crates of storage of stuff even more famous than we have on the walls, under lock and key and under serious security systems. But yeah, it's been an honor to be able to have this family collection down here. And it goes further. We're going to take a trip into the bathroom and a bedroom right now. As we enter the bedroom, in the lower level here, you'll see pictures all over the walls. We've got Ty Cobb. We've got some great pictures. Turn of the century up here, and even earlier. Over here we have a Jim Thorpe picture. Jim Thorpe won bunch of medals in the Olympics, and he had them stripped away because he got paid playing professional ball. It's a terrible story there. But yeah, you see some of these old Hall of Famers and turn of the century players. It's just unbelievable. Even the bathroom downstairs, we is touched up with pictures. We don't try to cover everything we can. We have so many pictures and not enough space. So we're looking to maybe open up a museum somewhere, or a restaurant or a bar or something to display a lot of this stuff. This is a pretty cool one. I got my dad this one back in the day. Chesterfield cigarettes. There's Stan Musial and Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio smoking cigarettes for an ad. You won't see that in this day and age. The old Houston Astrodome. How about that? So this room in here is dedicated to stadiums, mostly on the wall. And you've got the 1987 National League champion team. And Tony Pena, Tommy Herr, Ozzie, the whole gang right there, Vince Coleman. There's the famous Blonde Marischal whacking Johnny Roseboro over the head in postseason. This guy here in the 40s, 50s getting a beard dumped on him. The famous Lou Gehrig's speech, the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I feel like one of the luckiest men on the face of the earth to get to share our Blackstock family collection with you right here on Inside Sports. Well, nothing like a walk down memory lane from a bygone era with no cell phones, video games, air conditioning, etc. Well, that's our show for today. We've got, look at these gloves right here, early 1900s, mid 1900s, and even a Ken Griffey from the collection. And we appreciate all your support. Well, that's our show for today. We'd like to thank Dr. Ed Wheatley for joining us. We'd like to thank you for watching Inside Sports on STL TV Experience St. Louis.